Welcome, listener, in the shadows. We bring stories into the light. Join me as we explore the encounters no one speaks of and the things that watch from the dark. You were never supposed to see this, but since you have, you might as well wear it. From the vaults of the shadows, a new collection of unsettling apparel and artifacts pulled straight from the stories that were never meant to surface. Soft, worn-in shirts and hoodies that feel like something you dug out of a locked trunk in an abandoned ranger station. This isn't just merch, it's evidence. The Keepers of Flame, Chapter 1, Dispatch. I don't remember the name of the valley on the work order, just that it sounded Welsh and wrong coming out of my dispatcher's mouth. She said it so casually, too. Bit of a rural loop in the grid. Dead zone. No signal, no landlines. Locals called it in over CB, said every pole past marker 74 was dark. You're the closest team, so pack a bag, might take a night. That was it. No backup, no hazard pay, just a sagging manila folder marked Valley 19B, and a blinking pin on my GPS that kept shifting by a few hundred meters every time I checked it. Like the land couldn't quite decide where it wanted to be. The drive-in was beautiful in a kind of suffocating way. Pine trees so dense they looked like black combs scraping the sky. No birds, no signs, just the road narrowing with every mile, like I was being threaded into something. By the time I reached the access gate, dusk had set in. The chain was broken, bolts snapped clean through, like someone had twisted it until it popped. I logged it in my field report and drove on. At pole marker 73, everything stopped. The lights, the signal, the warmth. It was like someone flipped a switch on the entire valley. 1 minute I was bathed in that bluish twilight haze, the kind that makes asphalt glow. The next, total dark. Not night dark, not forest dark, but a dark that pressed, that hung. The cab of my truck felt suddenly smaller. The cabin lights swallowed into the seats before it could even hit the dash. I flicked my high beams on. Nothing. They lit up the hood like always, but beyond that, just a wall of absence. I stepped out, gravel underfoot. Cool air, my breath puffed out like steam and hung there, motionless. Then slowly drifted upward, like it had changed its mind about where it was supposed to go. Pole 74 stood crooked and broken. Something had burned it, but not with flame, not in the usual way. The wood wasn't charred. It was grey, brittle, like the light had been sucked out of it, leaving only the shell. The insulators were gone, not shattered, just gone. Even the bolts that held the crossbar were missing. I looked down and found footprints in the gravel. Bare, human, leading off into the trees. No shoes, no socks. Just soles and toe marks pressed perfectly into the dirt. I should have radioed in then. Should have marked it unsafe and turned around. But I followed them for maybe 30 yards. Just enough to see where they stopped, right in front of a tall pine that had been split clean in two. The inside of the wood was black, like wet ink. And beneath it, sitting neatly on the roots, was a glass lantern. It looked old, the kind you'd see in a war movie, heavy, brass-rimmed. But the glass was perfect, untouched, not a speck of soot on the wick. And hanging from its handle was a small tag, handwritten, tied with what looked like twine burned at both ends. It said, "Let it break. Light is where the dead forget." I didn't touch it. I left it there, heart pounding, backed away and returned to my truck. But when I got inside and turned the key, every bulb in the truck exploded. Headlamps, cabin light, even the LED on the dashboard, all at once. No bang, no flash, just gone. And in the rearview mirror, I swear I saw someone standing at the tree line, not moving, not walking, just watching, wrapped in something the color of smoke. Chapter 2, the lantern line. I didn't sleep that night. After the bulbs burst, I killed the engine and sat in the cab with the windows rolled up, the doors locked, my eyes on the mirror. Watching, waiting, hoping I'd imagined what I saw. But the figure at the tree line never moved. It didn't leave, didn't advance, just remained. Eventually, dawn came, sort of. The sky lightened to a dull pewter, and I felt confident enough to step out. No birdsong, no wind. Even the insects were silent, like the whole valley had paused, holding its breath. The figure was gone. I did a walk around of the truck. Every bulb really had shattered. The glass from the taillights looked melted inward, like something had sucked the light out instead of breaking it. The radio still worked, but all I got was static. No signal, no backup. I didn't want to go deeper, but the line had to be checked. I was already out here, and I knew how it'd look on my report if I came back empty-handed. So I suited up, slung my tool bag over one shoulder, and followed the path of the power lines into the valley. Pole 75 had collapsed entirely. Not snapped, but bent, like something had taken its top half and folded it down neatly. The crossbeam was resting in the dirt, and at its base sat another lantern, identical to the first. This one wasn't tagged, but something inside it scratched at the glass as I approached. At first I thought it was a bug, a moth maybe. Then it stopped moving, and I realized it wasn't inside the lantern. It was etched into the soot on the inside of the glass. A crude little stick figure, arms out, flames where the eyes should be. I stepped back and looked around. Still nothing. No movement, no birds, no wind, but I noticed a trail this time. A new one, lanterns. Dozens of them hung in trees, buried halfway in moss, tied to fence posts and branches, flickering faintly with some kind of dull orange light that didn't flicker naturally, more like a heartbeat. The flames never grew, never dimmed, just pulsed in slow rhythm. I followed them. I don't know why. Curiosity maybe. Fear. Some dumb, half-baked sense of duty. But the lanterns formed a kind of line, weaving through the valley, down into the dense groves where the pines grew crooked and too close together, where the moss was thick as shag carpet and cold seeped through your boots like water. That's where I found the circle. A clearing, or more accurately, a place where the trees had been pushed outward as if something had claimed the center. The earth was scorched black in a perfect radius, no wider than a small dining room. And in the middle, a figure knelt, not moving, facing away, wearing an ashen robe cinched at the waist with what looked like a cord made of braided soot. No sound, no breath. I didn't call out. Something in my gut screamed against it. I just watched, frozen. And then the figure twitched, not like a flinch, more like a reset. A shudder that started at the neck and rolled all the way down the spine, jerking each joint as if rebooting an old machine. That was enough. I turned and left, fast. Not running, I knew better, but fast enough to hear the leaves behind me move the wrong way, like wind traveling toward me instead of past. By the time I got back to the truck, it was dusk again. Somehow, I checked my phone dead, checked my watch, it had stopped. I hadn't been gone more than an hour, but the light said otherwise. Inside the cab on the passenger seat was a small, handwritten note. It wasn't there when I left, I'm sure of it. It said, "The fire is the prison, free them, you'll understand soon." And signed at the bottom, in small, crooked script. KF, I hadn't heard of them yet, but that was the first time I saw the name, Keepers of Flame. Chapter 3, lightless the next morning, I woke to find the sun had never risen. Not fully. The sky had the strange blue-grey cast of an eclipse. No shadows, no warmth. Just a bleached sort of cold that clung to the skin. I was still in the truck, seatbelt across my chest, neck aching from sleeping upright. The note from yesterday was gone. No breeze, no crack in the windows, just gone. Even stranger, my flashlight wouldn't turn on, nor the cabin light. I flipped the switch back and forth until I nearly cracked the plastic. Nothing. I checked my backup, brand new batteries, and it sputtered once before flickering out like it had never worked to begin with. That was the beginning of it. My tools had been pulled out of their satchel and arranged in a ring outside the driver's side door. Carefully, deliberately, like someone had taken their time. Each one pointed inward toward the center of the ring, where the smashed remains of a third lantern now sat, crushed into the soil. It hadn't been there before. I didn't touch it. Something in me recoiled, like this was sacred, or cursed, or both. Instead, I packed up and drove out toward the next substation, trying to regain some semblance of purpose, direction, normalcy. But the deeper into the valley I went, the more it felt like the landscape was forgetting how to be a place. Roads didn't curve right. Trees leaned wrong. Light didn't behave. Every time I passed under one of the poles along the line, my headlights dimmed, not flickered, but dimmed, like they were ashamed of shining. I stopped once just to test it and stepped out with my penlight. raised it toward a tree. The moment the beam reached the bark, it split, like the darkness tore it apart. I swear I saw something in the tree, something inside the bark, a face, screaming. The light didn't return. The batteries drained instantly. And then I heard it again, glass cracking. It echoed softly across the valley, like distant firecrackers on a windless night. I thought it was coming from behind me, then in front, then both. Lanterns were going out. Not all at once, but in sequence. A spreading of darkness like ink in milk, each point of light swallowed in turn. And standing just past the last one I could see, illuminated for a breathless moment before it too vanished, was a figure in an ashen robe, head tilted, arms limp at its sides. There was something wrong with its silhouette. Too narrow, too tall, not quite human. I gunned the engine. Dirt spat behind the tires as I tore back up the road toward my last marked station. I figured if I could get out of the valley, even partway, maybe I'd get a signal. Maybe I could radio dispatch, call for backup. But the higher I climbed, the darker it got. Not sunset dark, not storm cloud dark, just absence. Colorless, absolute. And right before I lost the light entirely, I saw something scratched into the dust on my windshield, appearing as if drawn from the inside. A symbol, a flame upside down. Beneath it, 3 words, light trapped souls. I kept driving, and I started to believe them. Chapter 4, the emberless station. I don't remember arriving at the next substation. I must have driven there. The truck was idling, and the keys were still in my hand. But I couldn't recall the last 10 minutes. No landmarks, no time passing. Just one moment in darkness, the next parked in front of a rust-streaked concrete box embedded in the hillside. It looked abandoned, not recently, long abandoned. Half buried in moss, its siding eaten by rot, the padlock on the door rusted through and hanging open like it had given up trying to keep anyone out. No tire tracks, no footprints, just stillness and the sound of wet leaves settling. I got out and the wind stopped, not lessened, stopped. No branches rustled, no air moved. It was like I'd stepped into a sealed room with no walls. A low red LED flickered above the door. Emergency backup, barely enough to see by. I stepped inside. The air inside the station was thick, damp, wrong, not just mold and rust, though there was plenty of both, but something older. It smelled like the underside of something never meant to be exposed. Like the world had turned its face and refused to acknowledge this place still existed. I pulled out my phone for light. It turned on, thank God, for 3 seconds. Then the screen filled with static and died. The walls were lined with circuit boxes and dead terminals. One had been smashed, wires splayed like torn tendons. Another had been painted over in black ash, not paint, ash. Someone had drawn long streaks of it in vertical lines down every surface, like the walls had been weeping soot. In the back corner, a candle had been placed in a small dish of water. A wick floated, unlit. The matchbox beside it was wet, but there was someone else inside. I didn't hear him enter. He was just there, sitting in a folding chair I hadn't seen before. Ashen robe, bare feet caked in mud, his head tilted as if listening to something deeper than sound. I didn't speak at first. I couldn't. My throat seized. He looked at me with the kind of expression you give a mirror that was too slow to reflect you. "I'm not here to hurt you," I said before I could stop myself. "I know," he whispered. "You haven't yet been lit." His voice didn't echo, even though it should have in that tiny room. "What is this?" I asked. "What the hell is going on out here?" He looked at the unlit wick. "A prison," he said, "built by those who feared what comes after flame. We are the key that opens it, and we only open it for those who have seen the lie of light." "You're the ones smashing the lanterns," I said. "That's you," he smiled. Not kind, not cruel, just inevitable. Light holds them, souls, suffering, they're caught in reflection. Glass is the final sin of the modern world. You come carrying glass and fire. You trap them in your wake. "I'm just trying to fix the grid." He stood. He was taller than I expected. "The grid is the lock," he said. "The valley is the door." And then all the LEDs died at once, total black, but I could still see him, I could feel him. His shape lingered in the dark like heat, like burned in vision after staring too long at the sun. "Put it down," he whispered. "Put what down?" He reached out, not with hands, with something deeper. A weight pressed against my chest. The flame you carry. And in that moment, I realized I was still holding my flashlight, even though it hadn't worked in hours, even though I hadn't tried to turn it on again, even though it had no batteries left inside it at all. I dropped it, and the dark got darker, but something else lit up, a tiny flicker, not of flame, but of movement in the pitch. Something that had been standing in the corner the entire time. Something that only now began to approach. Chapter 5. They who guide. I didn't run. I couldn't. That part of my brain, the survival spark that should have made my legs move, was locked in place, frozen like the rest of me. Not paralyzed, but held. As if the dark itself was a pressure system, and I'd become part of its gravity. The thing in the corner didn't walk. It slid. Not gliding, sliding. Like shadow peeling itself from a wall, a suggestion of shape at first, the slight tilt of shoulders, a long torso framed in wet fabric or skin, hard to tell which. No feet, just motion. No eyes, just direction. It didn't make a sound. Not the creak of weight, not a whisper, not a single breath. And yet I knew it was moving, felt it brushing the edge of where my awareness ended. And then, like a switch had flipped, the overhead light burst to life. Not the flickering LEDs, not emergency red. It was a raw, white flood. Blinding. I staggered back, shielding my eyes, blinking spots. The chair was empty. The man in the robe was gone. But I wasn't alone. The thing that had been sliding toward me was still there. Only now it was still, standing in full illumination. And what I saw shouldn't have been real. It looked human, if your idea of human had been passed down through 5 generations of broken memory and guesswork. 7 feet tall, bones too long, joints at odd angles, arms dangling just a bit too close to the floor. The face was smoothed over, like a candle left too close to heat, all details melted into suggestion. And draped across it, looped like ceremonial fabric, were power cords, tangled, burned, and fused into the thing's skin like veins. Its chest pulsed slowly, like an inverter rhythmically surging with unused power. Then the lights above it snapped, one by one. Pop, 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 darkness again. But this time I didn't drop my flashlight. I fumbled it on, and by some miracle, some perverse joke of irony, it worked. I swept the beam across the space, breath shallow, teeth clenched. The station was empty. Even the ash streaks were gone. The circuit boxes were untouched. The candle and dish of water were missing. It was like the room had been reset, except for the far wall, where my flashlight beam caught a message, smudged in ash just beneath the breaker box. Do not bring them light. My comm unit buzzed, sharp and sudden, and I nearly dropped the flashlight again. It was dispatch. Unit 7, we're seeing fluctuations from Station 3. You're the closest. Can you confirm status? My throat was dry. I pressed the mic. Station's been compromised, I said. Send backup. There was a pause, static. Then, Station 3's been offline since last night, Unit 7. You shouldn't be near that valley. That circuit was decommissioned months ago. What? Maury static. Then, where the hell are you? I looked outside. The landscape had changed. The forest I drove through was gone, replaced by tall, narrow trees with bark blackened like they'd been burned from the inside out. No road. No utility markers. Just a trail of broken glass, light bulb shards, leading into the woods. And at the edge of that tree lane I saw them. Figures, dozens of them, standing in absolute stillness. Ashen robes, faces hidden. Some carried broken lanterns. Others held bundles of wire or hunks of charred glass. And they were all facing me. Behind them the woods looked wrong. The trees didn't sway, not even a little. And the darkness between them, it moved, it welcomed. Chapter 6. The path of unlight, the trail wasn't a path so much as a wound. Each step I took forward felt like walking through a place not meant for after things, like something terrible had already happened, and I'd missed the moment of catastrophe. Only the scar remained. The glass shards weren't scattered randomly. They lined the sides like grotesque breadcrumbs, glittering like frozen embers in the dim. Behind me, the station had vanished from view, and my radio had gone to dead silence. No static, no hum, just absence. The woods didn't make noise. No birds, no insects. Even my own footfalls were muffled, as though the darkness was swallowing sound too. Every breath I took came back thinner, like the air itself resented being disturbed. I tried the flashlight again, still working, but the beam had grown shorter. The light just didn't reach as far anymore, pulled inward like it was being absorbed. Then I noticed the trees were changing. The bark was ashen, flaking in slow curls like burned paper, and some trunks were slick with moisture that smelled faintly metallic. Roots tangled above the soil like reaching fingers. Some were wrapped with strings of melted fairy lights. Others had burnt-out bulbs tied to them with cloth soaked black. That's when I saw the symbols, drawn in soot and what might have once been blood. Circles inside broken squares, spirals ending in a dot. The marks followed the path, guiding it, and I followed them. I don't know why. Call it exhaustion, call it curiosity. Maybe something in the dark was pulling me forward, not like a rope, but a suggestion. A nudge behind the eyes. A presence just out of reach, whispering in sensation, not sound. After maybe 30 minutes of trudging through that unnatural silence, the forest broke. I stepped into a clearing, wide, black, impossibly flat. The grass had been burned away in a perfect circle, 20 feet wide. In the center stood a tall wooden post, charred at the tip. Around it, 6 smaller posts, each with remnants of light sources nailed or bound to them. Lanterns, broken LED panels, even a child's nightlight with cartoon eyes faded to white. They'd been ritualistically destroyed. At the base of the center post, a book lay open. The pages weren't printed. They'd been carved, inkless, gouged with something sharp, every word torn into the fibers of the page like it was meant to bleed meaning. I stepped closer. The symbols matched the ones on the trees, but there was something else beneath the book, a badge, weathered, bent, utility authority ID. Mine. Only the face wasn't me. The name was right, but the face, it had no eyes, just 2 perfect sockets of black, like someone had erased them with a fingertip. Then the torchlight broke through the trees, dozens of them, flickering, but not from fire. I realized with horror they were not flames but dying bulbs, being held aloft by the robed figures. Each bulb sputtered in a dying strobe, casting their bearers in quick, haunting snapshots. Closer, closer, they surrounded the circle, and they began to chant. Not in words I could understand. It wasn't even language. It was breath made deliberate. The sound of something remembering itself after too long a sleep. In front of me, a new figure stepped forward, taller than the others, hood draped low. They reached out and pressed a hand, palm down, on the center post, and all the bulbs went out. Instant black, but I saw everything, not with my eyes, with something deeper. The flame they spoke of wasn't a literal fire. It was consciousness, awareness, ego. Light was what trapped souls in place, forced identity, forced memory, forced self. They weren't destroying light. They were liberating it, freeing the pieces that clung too tightly to their own shape. That's why the bulbs burst, why the candles failed. They weren't being extinguished, they were being released. I opened my mouth to scream and found my voice gone, not stolen, lifted. Like ash on the wind, the chant rose, the circle burned cold, and I began to understand. It wasn't death they were offering, it was forgetting. Chapter 7, the dark remembering the black didn't lift. It settled, thick and alive, like velvet soaked in oil, clinging to my skin and thoughts in equal measure. I wasn't sure if my eyes were open. There was no up or down anymore, only the sense of standing, of stillness, like the world had slowed, or I'd been pulled into the seam between frames of reality. Somewhere nearby, something breathed. It wasn't the rhythmic kind of breath. No inhale, no exhale, just the pressure of presence. A ripple against the space I occupied, bending the dark around it. And I felt unwound. Like threads had begun to pull from me, ideas separating themselves from memory. I knew who I was, but only because I was trying to. My name sat on the edge of my mind like a word in a dream, real in theory, but dissolving under scrutiny. I moved, I think. My hand reached out and found fabric dry and coarse, like old canvas wrapped in smoke. A robe. Someone's shoulder. Fingers closed over mine, not aggressive, not comforting, just final. As if to say, you're here now. The dark shifted. A match struck. For a half second there was flame, a small, flickering thing cradled in calloused hands, not to banish the dark but to frame it. The tall figure, the one who'd led the chant, stepped forward into the glow. His face was not hidden but wrong, smooth where it shouldn't be, features blurred like a wax mask melting inward. No nose, no ears, just hints, the suggestion of a man. He spoke without moving his mouth. "We don't take. We remind," the flame flickered. "Light is a lie, a memory that traps itself in mirrors. We set it free." Behind him, the others stood motionless, hooded silhouettes ringing the clearing like statues carved from coal dust. Not breathing, not swaying, just waiting. The lead figure crouched and traced a finger through the ash at my feet. "You've seen what happens when light is forced to linger. You've seen the suffering of names." I tried to speak, to ask what they wanted, what this had to do with the blackouts, but my voice still hadn't come back. My thoughts echoed like steps in a collapsing hallway. He seemed to hear me anyway. "The stations draw too much. They bind too tightly. Your people think they illuminate, but all they do is nail the soul to the walls of the world." He extended the flame. It didn't cast shadows. It cast versions. For a breath, I saw myself standing beneath the power lines, my body outlined in smoke, tethered by cords that pulsed like veins. I saw my own hands wiring boxes, eyes squinting in artificial daylight, a routine made holy by repetition. You live by bulbs and buzzing things, but the old dark knows you. Then he cupped the flame and crushed it. Total black again. Only now I could feel the clearing, the robes, the heat of bodies that didn't move, only radiated belief. It wasn't darkness that scared me. It was the comfort of it. How easy it became to forget the shape of light. The figure stepped closer. I felt breath on my face. Not warm, not even real, just an idea of nearness. "You've been claimed by names and numbers, but if you want to know freedom, let go of the filament, step off the grid, become unlit." And for the first time I wanted to, not out of fear, but peace. A quiet I hadn't known I craved, but some small part of me, that ember of stubborn spark, flared. I thought of the relay station, the damage, the map I'd left, the people expecting my report, the wrongness of disappearing without a ripple. I remembered myself. And in that memory, I took a step backward. The pressure changed. They knew. The stillness cracked like glass. The ritual hadn't ended. Not yet, but I had broken its hold. And now I was marked. Chapter 8, where light fails, I ran. I didn't hear footsteps behind me. No pursuit. No raised voices. Just the silence of something that didn't need to chase, because it had already been let in. The forest was wrong. There should have been moonlight, or at least stars, something to stitch direction into the canopy above. But all I saw was a heaviness, a curtain of black so thick that my flashlight couldn't pierce more than a foot ahead. The beam sputtered like it was dying of thirst. I kept moving anyway. Roots tore at my boots. Branches whispered against my sleeves like fingers. And always, just outside the edge of what little I could see, movement. Not animal-like, not human, just present, like shadows watching from darker shadows. I had no sense of direction, only distance, the hope that if I put enough space between me and that clearing, I could find a place light still mattered. After what felt like an hour, I stumbled onto the service road. Gravel, man-made. It felt like a miracle. I collapsed beside the utility pole and craned my head upward, searching for the transformer that should have been humming like a heartbeat. Dead. The pole's entire top was charred. Not struck, burned. The relay box had caved in like something had imploded from within. And there, beside it, painted in long swipes of soot across the wood, was the spiral symbol I'd seen on the cultist robes. A black sun, encircled by flame, or perhaps by the absence of it. I remembered the way the tall one had crushed the flame in his hand, how the light hadn't dimmed but folded inward, like it had remembered it didn't belong. My radio still clung to my belt. I pulled it free with shaking hands, thumbed the switch. "Dispatch, this is Ranger Morales," static. Then, just beneath the hiss, a whisper. "Let it go." I hurled the radio into the woods. I didn't want to know if the voice was in the radio or around it. The truck. If I could get to the truck, maybe. I crested a ridge and froze. The headlights were on. They shouldn't have been. I hadn't left them that way. As I neared, the light grew weaker, not dimmer, just exhausted. The beams didn't push back the night. They just glowed like dying embers, caught in the air around the cab. By the time I opened the door, the lights blinked once and then died. And written on the windshield in ash, in letters smeared by a human hand, were the words, "You cannot guide the dead." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I sat behind the wheel and closed my eyes, letting the night wrap around me like a cloak. I told myself that if I didn't move, if I didn't think too hard, maybe morning would come. Maybe the sun would do what it always did and make sense of things. But morning never came, only more night. And out of the tree line, robed figures stood again, quiet as bark, motionless in rows, facing the truck with reverent patience. They weren't blocking the path. They were waiting for the lights to go out for good. And when they did, so would I. Chapter 9. What follows the light? I don't remember falling asleep. Maybe I didn't. I think the dark just convinced me I had numbed my mind until awareness felt like dreaming, and dreaming felt like being buried. I woke or came to with the truck cabin flooded in shadow. The keys were still in the ignition, but the battery was long dead. Every panel light, every diode gone cold. I tried the door handle. Stuck. I tried again, harder this time, and it gave with a metallic pop. The door creaked open like something reluctant, not rusted. The cold outside was a different kind, not freezing, not natural, just devoid of anything. Like it was pulling temperature out of me rather than offering any in return. They were gone, the robed figures. The trees even seemed further apart. I stepped out slowly. There were no crickets, no wind. Not even the distant babble of the creek that should have been less than 200 yards downslope. No life. But I heard something else, faint, almost melodic. A chime, like metal swaying against metal. I followed it. The sound came from beyond the utility road, into the denser part of the forest that maps labeled undeveloped, but locals just called the Stillwood. A patch so thick it didn't show up right on thermal scans. I'd read old reports about it. Birds avoided it. GPS cut out near it. Even fire breaks curved around it without explanation. And in the center of it now, a distant, flickering light. It shouldn't have been possible. Not after what I'd seen. Not after what I knew. But it was there, dancing like a firefly, beckoning. I moved toward it, not fast, not with hope, but with the dull gravity of someone following a riddle to its last word. As I moved, the trees changed. They stopped reaching upward. Their limbs bent inward, bowing toward the trail I walked, as if conceding to something greater passing between them. Not me. The flame hovered above a stump. A lantern, old, all fed. It looked handcrafted, carved with spiraling runes that shimmered faintly, as if reacting to my presence. I didn't touch it. I knew what they wanted. Light, not to banish them, but to guide them. Something moved behind me, not footsteps, not rustling, just a shifting in the weight of the air, the way a room feels different when someone walks in behind you. And then, a voice. You carried the flame here, Morales. It wasn't spoken aloud. It breathed into my thoughts, low, cracked, ancient. I turned slowly, and there he was, a man, or what used to be one. Gaunt, skin stretched tight over bone, ashen like old coal, and eyes black, depthless, like holes burned into paper. He wore the robes of the keepers, but older, tattered beyond recognition. The spiral on his chest carved into the skin beneath the fabric, as if tattooed by fire. Why me? I asked, barely able to speak. Because you tried to fix the light. His hand lifted, slow, reverent, and pointed to the lantern. Finish what you began. I stepped forward. The air was syrup now. Thick, slow, every breath felt stolen. I reached for the lantern. My fingers brushed the handle. And in that moment, I saw everything. Every spirit they'd freed. Every beam they'd shattered. Every spark they'd buried. Not out of hatred for light, but because it traps. It holds what should have been let go. The flame pulsed once, not warmly, but knowingly. And I knew I wasn't here to stop them. I was here to replace the one who had. I turned back. But the forest was no longer behind me. Only darkness, only silence, only flame. Chapter 10, a light to leave the world. I stood alone, lantern in hand, mouth dry, heart slow, not from fear anymore, not exactly, but because something had left me. Something I hadn't noticed going until it was already gone. A tether, maybe. A thread to the world I came from. The man, the thing who'd spoken before, was nowhere to be seen. But I felt his presence. Not behind me, not around me, within me, like the heat left after stepping too close to a bonfire. The flame in the lantern flickered once, casting no shadow. It didn't waver in the wind. It didn't warm my skin. It simply was. And it waited. I don't know how long I stood there. Minutes, hours, time was soft here. Bendable. Then the trees began to creak. Not from the wind, there was no wind, but from something shifting, something reorienting. The forest was turning. Slowly, subtly, twisting inwards. A great circling. And I heard them again, the keepers. Soft footfalls. The hiss of their robes dragging through underbrush. A murmuring chant that wasn't words but absence of sound, as if they weren't saying anything but unmaking noise itself. They gathered around the circle. 15, maybe 20, all ashen-robed, all barefoot, lips sealed with soot. Some were old, some were children. One had no mouth at all. They knelt, not to me, to the flame. And that's when I understood. They weren't trying to destroy the light. They were feeding it. Each smashed bulb, each snuffed candle, each broken headlamp, it was an offering. A light extinguished meant a soul released, its echo absorbed into this eternal lantern. This vessel. The lantern was the prison. And now they wanted me to carry it, not for power, but to wander, to guide, to find other lights, artificial or sacred, and feed them into the fold. I tried to speak. I didn't ask for this, but no one answered. They simply stood, turned, and walked into the forest, backward, never showing their faces, leaving me alone again, except I wasn't. The lantern pulsed in my hand, and I saw my reflection in the glass. My face was changing, eyes deepening, burning from within, skin paling to grey, teeth sharpening at the edges like something unfinished. I wasn't the same man who entered the valley, and the valley, it was no longer behind me. There was only forest now, endless, shifting. The flame in the lantern grew brighter just slightly, as if acknowledging its new bearer. I took the first step, down the slope, past the dead transformer, into a world that would not know I had left. Behind me the power grid blinked. Lights in homes sputtered, one by one. And above it all, the stars disappeared, one at a time. I walk now. I walk until I see a light that doesn't belong. And I ask it, gently, lovingly, are you ready to go out now? You made it back for now. But the things in the dark never truly leave, do they? They watch, they wait, and perhaps they remember you now too. If you want to hear more, if you dare to listen again, step back into the shadows. Like the video. Subscribe, but know this, some doors once opened do not close so easily.